There comes a silent, almost invisible point in every successful investor's journey when saving money actually stops making sense. It is not because saving is inherently bad, or because you have suddenly become so wealthy that money no longer matters to you. It is something much more subtle, a psychological and mathematical shift that most people miss entirely. Unless you are paying very close attention to the hard numbers of your life, you might pass this milestone without even realizing it. Most people spend their entire lives in a state of grinding, constantly cutting coupons and skipping vacations just to build a secure nest egg. But for many of you watching this in the middle of 2026, you may have already crossed a finish line you didn't even know existed. We are going to break down exactly when this shift happens and why continuing to obsess over saving could be the single biggest financial mistake of your later years. Think back to the early days of your career when you first started out. Back then, every single dollar you managed to put away felt like a massive victory. If you saved $100, that $100 moved the needle because your portfolio was very small. In those beginning stages, your hard work and your manual deposits were the only things making your wealth grow at all. If you had $10,000 and the market grew by 10%, you made $1,000 in profit. But if you contributed $6,000 that year from your own paycheck, your own personal effort was 6 times more powerful than the market itself. You were the engine, the driving force, and the portfolio was just a passenger along for the ride. Because of this experience, your brain became wired over decades to believe that work and sacrifice are the only ways to stay safe. You learned that to be responsible meant to keep pushing, keep saving, and keep depriving yourself of current joys for a future goal. But fast forward to today, in the heart of 2026, and the financial landscape for you has likely changed forever. If you have stayed disciplined and remained consistent with your investments, you are likely approaching, or have already hit, the first major tipping point. This is the moment when your investments earn more in a typical year than you could ever realistically contribute from your own paycheck. Imagine for a moment that you have a portfolio of $1 million. At a long-term average return of 10% from the S&P 500, that portfolio generates $100,000 on its own every single year. Now I want you to ask yourself a very honest question. Are you still stressing out about saving $500 a month from your current salary? That $500 only adds up to $6,000 over the course of an entire year. In the grand scheme of $1 million portfolio, that $6,000 is nothing more than a rounding error. It is less than a 1% fluctuation on a random Tuesday afternoon in the stock market. The massive effort you are putting in to save that extra bit of money is no longer moving the needle of your life. The river of compounding has become so powerful and so wide that the tiny drops of water you are adding from your bucket are barely noticeable. This led us to a very difficult psychological realization for the generation of baby boomers and early Generation X. You have spent 30 or 40 years perfecting the art of frugality. You know exactly how to say no to yourself. You have mastered the ability to delay gratification for a rainy day. But the tragedy is that you were never taught how to turn that switch off once the sun started shining. In fact, for many people in this position, the idea of spending money actually feels like a physical pain. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it the pain of paying. When you have built your entire identity and your sense of self-worth around being a saver, spending money feels like you are losing the game. But in 2026, with inflation behaving the way it is and life expectancy continuing to increase, the real risk is not running out of money. The real risk is running out of time and health while sitting on a massive mountain of cash that you are too afraid to touch. Let's look at the second tipping point, which is even more profound and life-changing. This is the moment when your portfolio earns as much in returns as your actual job pays you in a year. If you earn $80,000 a year at your office and your investments are generating $80,000 in returns, you have essentially cloned yourself. There is a digital version of you out there working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single day of the year. This second version of you doesn't get tired, doesn't need expensive health insurance, and never complains about the morning commute. At this specific stage, your relationship with your employer should change completely. You are no longer working because you have a desperate need for the money. You are working because you choose to be there. This is the definition of true financial independence. It gives you the incredible power to walk away from toxic environments or to spend more time with your family without any fear of the future. Yet, many people hit this massive milestone and keep their heads down, continuing to grind as if they were still broke. They are still pushing that heavy boulder up the hill, even though the boulder has already reached the very top. It is now starting to roll down the other side with its own momentum, and they are still leaning into it with all their strength. Think about the metaphor of a gardener tending to a slow-growing orchard. In the first few years, you are watering tiny saplings every single day. You are pulling every weed by hand and worrying about every single frost or dry spell. But 30 years later, you have a forest of massive, towering fruit trees. They produce more fruit than you and your entire extended family could ever possibly eat. At that point, does it really make sense to keep stressing about watering a single tiny seedling? No, your job has fundamentally changed from being a gardener to being a harvester. If you don't harvest the fruit today, it will simply rot on the ground and go to waste. In the world of finance, rotting fruit represents the experiences you could have had, but didn't, because you were too busy saving for a future that has already arrived. Consider a couple who has reached $5 million in total assets. They have lived a very modest life, stayed in the same small home for 20 years, and always driven reliable used cars. Based on the conservative 4% withdrawal rule, they could comfortably spend $200,000 every single year without ever touching their principal balance. That is more than double what they ever spent during their peak working years. And yet, you might still find them standing in the grocery store aisle, debating whether to buy the organic strawberries because they cost $2 more. This is what I call the frugality trap. It is a mental prison built out of habits that were once very useful, but are now completely obsolete. The reality of the world in 2026 is that we are living in an era of massive wealth transfer and market volatility. If you have done the hard work, and the math clearly shows you are at the tipping point, your focus must shift from accumulation to optimization. Optimization means making sure your money is working as hard as possible so that you don't have to anymore. It means reviewing your tax strategies to ensure that the government does not become your primary heir. It means looking closely at your estate plan and deciding if you want to give to your children now, while they are young and can actually use the help. Waiting until you are gone might be too late for the money to have its greatest impact. Think about the massive difference of $10,000 given to a 30-year-old child for a down payment on their first home. Now compare that to leaving them $100,000 when they are already 60 and preparing for their own retirement. The smaller amount given earlier often has a much larger impact on their overall quality of life. This is what economists call the utility of money. A dollar spent or given when you are 65 has significantly more utility than a dollar spent when you are 95 and in a nursing home. As you get older, your spending floor often rises due to healthcare costs, but your spending ceiling for fun and travel often drops because you simply don't have the energy you once did. The time to enjoy the fruits of your labor is right now, while the boulder is rolling and you still have the health to ride it. Many people worry about the sequence of returns risk, which is the fear that the market will crash right as they start spending their money. While that is a valid concern to have, the historical data shows that most people who reach the $1 or $2 million mark actually end up with more money 20 years into retirement than they started with. Compounding is a relentless, unstoppable engine. Once you have reached a certain velocity, it is actually quite difficult to stop the growth. Even if the market has a bad year, a well-diversified portfolio in 2026 is designed to weather the storm. If you are only withdrawing 4% and the market averages 8 to 10% over time, your nest egg will continue to grow even as you are spending it. This is the ultimate irony of wealth in our society. The people who are the best at building wealth are often the worst at actually enjoying it. They have spent so long staring at the green numbers on a computer screen that they have forgotten what those numbers were supposed to represent in the first place. They represented freedom. They represented security. They represented the ability to say yes to your grandkids and no to a stressful, unfulfilling job. If you find yourself still checking your bank account every single day and worrying about minor monthly expenses, Take a step back and breathe. Look at your total net worth. Look at your average annual returns over the last decade. Compare those returns to your actual annual spending. If your money is making significantly more than you are spending, you have already won the game. There is no extra credit given for dying with the highest score in the bank. The goal is to live a life that is rich in experiences, rich in relationships, and free from the constant, low-level anxiety of not having enough. As we move through 2026, let this be the year you finally acknowledge your own success. The climb was very long, the hill was incredibly steep, but you have finally reached the crest. It is time to let go of the boulder and let it roll. It is time to stop being a slave to your savings and start being the true master of your time. If you continue to contribute aggressively to your accounts long after the math says you need to, you aren't being responsible. You are being irrational. You are trading your most precious, non-renewable resource, which is your time, for more of a resource you already have in abundance. That is a trade that no smart investor should ever make. Take a long, honest look at your portfolio today. Calculate your own personal tipping point number. If you are already there, give yourself the permission you've been waiting for to breathe. Give yourself permission to upgrade your quality of life, to support the causes you deeply care about, and to be truly present with the people you love. Because in the end, wealth is not about the number of zeros in your bank account. It is about the number of memories you have created with the people who matter most to you. The orchard is full. The harvest is finally ready. Don't let the fruit rot on the branch. Enjoy the life you have worked so hard to build over all these years. You have earned every bit of it, and you deserve to see the power of compounding work for your personal happiness, not just for your balance sheet. The momentum is entirely on your side now. The heavy lifting of your life is done. The only thing left for you to do is to actually live. Trust the process you have followed for years. Trust the math that got you here. And most importantly, trust yourself to handle the freedom you have worked so hard to create. It is a brand new world in 2026, and you are perfectly positioned to thrive in it. Don't let the survival habits of the past steal the joy of your future. The tipping point has arrived. The only question left is, are you brave enough to stop pushing? It takes a very special kind of courage to stop saving and finally start living. But that is exactly what the most successful people in the world do. They know when to play the game, and they know when the game has been won. You have won. Now go out there and enjoy the victory you have earned.